had sworn to myself that I would not talk about COVID in this podcast. However, I recently had a conversation with a doctor friend responsible for introduction of COVID vaccine in an African country, and he said he would be willing to take the Russian vaccine, the Sputnik vaccine, because at least they never tried to colonize us, meaning that the Russians never had an African colony. And yet, Russia once had a colony, or at least a secret attempt to start one on the African continent. And the funny part of this is that this project, this Russian project, called the New Moscow, was unknowingly funded by another colonialist country at the time. Can you guess that country? Hello friends, and hang on for a long flight from Russia to Europe and then to Africa.
African History Daily by my daddy.
Let's start from the beginning with a group of Russian Orthodox clergymen who had already imagined settling in Africa. They had planned to try and civilize the locals indirectly through clerical ties and make some money from the resources, of course, and then use force and arms if locals resisted. What always fascinates me in African history is the ease with which so-called civilizers go from the religion affiliation to armed robbery. Unfortunately for them, this first attempt didn't work out, but then it was only a small postponement. For the second attempt, please make way for real professionals. A certain Nikolai Achinov is one of them, an expert of colonization business. But of course, he came with his share of losses as well. He was the head of the expedition of the Brotherhood of Free Cossacks that failed to colonize the Black Sea coast between Novorossiysk and Batum. Following that loss, Achinov fled to Constantinople with his troops and there quickly got back to business. He obtained intel from British agents about Egypt and Abyssinia, now Ethiopia, with its fantastic sites of Lalibela and Gondar. So, the British, eager to use Achinov's anti-government posture, hired him and his troops to smuggle arms into Afghanistan. But Achinov is quite a character. He cashed in from the British, then sold the plan to the Russians before heading to playing the spy in Cairo and then going to kiss the beautiful Asmara, the current capital of Eritrea, which was then in Abyssinia. There he falls in love with Africa and is determined to come back for good. Because guess what? The thing is quite serious with the beautiful Abyssinia. But now, starting a prosperous African colony is like paying a dowry in Zimbabwe, right? You need business godfathers. He tells them that he was donated lands by a sultan in northeastern Africa, that he plans to establish a colony there. He got support from Russian businessmen, in particular a rich merchant, who had given him a large shipment of presents for his future host in Abyssinia. But Achinov, the trickster, went on to sell them immediately. Then he tries to get the support of the Russian government. And for that, he proposed to the Ethiopian emperor, Johannes, to send a emissary for a religious festival in Russia. Religion to indoctrinate the locals. It still works until today. So Johannes accepts, but his poor people freeze for several months there before finally being able to meet with Tsar Alexander. This is due to the pressure that was put by European powers who do not want a new player in this multiplayer chess game on African soil. Tsar Alexander wants to embark on the famous scramble for Africa. Achinov was the perfect guy. The risk was minimal for Russia. If Achinov succeeds, then it's jackpot. If he fails, then he's considered an adventurer. This is how, on a D-Day, Achinov lives, and with him, men, children, and women who, we can imagine, very fertile, ready to populate the promised land. Here they arrive after a long and tiring journey in the Gulf of Tadjoura on January 6, 1889, in a territory called, at the time, French Somalia, and later on French territory of Afar and Issas, and much later Djibouti. While the wives must have been still unpacking the suitcases, some of the Achinov men had the brilliant idea of raiding the Danakil and helping themselves to just one cow and a sheep. Nothing bad, they thought, they just wanted to feed the family. But then they were far from imagining that an event so harmless would change the fate of this venture. Imagine that France, then itself an illegal occupier, and especially Italy, which has just invaded neighboring Somalia, and who fears to be overtaken by Russia in Ethiopia, accuse the Russian of stealing. You got to be kidding me. So there was actually private property rules on this continent in those days. And we, the colonized, we didn't even know. Seriously? Seriously, guys. Anyway, for cattle wrestling, Russia is summoned to publicly denounce this attempt at colonization. Achinov tried to arrange this like payment, but he failed. Regardless, cattle wrestling or not, Russian settlers, demonstrating so much professionalism, took up residence in an abandoned fort in the village of Sagalo, which they renamed the New Moscow. So now they had a home. You would think it's time to finally unpack the suitcases. Not even. Imagine on February 5th, just 1 month after their arrival, the New Moscow was bombarded by a French cruiser and 3 gunboats. Checkmate again this time for Achinov. Russia publicly said he was sent by no one. Achinov only had to surrender.
6 dead, 2 children and 3 women, including 1 pregnant. 22 wounded, 1 lost sheep and 1 lost cow.
That is the summary of a very brief Russian colony and directly financed by the British. Almost 7 years later, on March 1st, 1896, the Italians invaded this same Abyssinia in an attempt to colonize it. But they got humiliated, as we know, in Adwa by the troops of Emperor Menelik and his wife, Empress Taitu Betul, the founder of the current capital, Addis Ababa.
C'est formidable!
My African cliché of the day is that of certain Ethiopian friends who do not hesitate to brag to other Africans that they have never been colonized. This is obviously not true, since Mussolini's Italy well settled in Ethiopia from 1936 to 1941, avenging in the humiliating defeat 40 years earlier. Of course, it was a very short colonization period compared to other African countries, but it's not the right account of history. Anyway, I wonder if these Ethiopians would be less proud if they knew that this whole bragging thing, they owe it
to a sheep and a cow.
These blessed ones without whom they would be bragging probably in Russian.
До свидания. Say it with me. До свидания. До свидания.
The same way the national dishes served on Ethiopian Airlines flights perhaps would be the grechka, the pirozhki, the borscht soup made from beetroot, and of course the pelmeni, those fantastic Russian meat dumplings.
Dumpling made of British turkey meat?
No. Well, maybe the British paid for that one too. Anyway, until we board again, make sure you work on your Russian language skills. They may be useful to qualify for Sputnik vaccine. Thank you and
До свидания. That means goodbye.